Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching me on YouTube or on Rumble. As you may know, the Israeli occupation forces have killed the leader of the political bureau of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. So before we proceed with today's live streaming, I have to make, of course, the usual disclaimer and note that myself and this YouTube channel do not endorse or support any proscribed group or any proscribed group as a terrorist group by the German government here. Therefore, I have to make this note quite loud and clear before I proceed with today's live streaming, because every day new independent journalists are harassed and some of them are detained and others are questioned and asked to give their electronics, their laptops, their mobiles to the competent authorities. And today in the morning, for example, the British counterterrorism police raided the home and seized several electronic devices belonging to the Electronic Intifada's associate editor, Asa Winstanley. Approximately 10 officers arrived at his home in North London before 6 a.m. in the morning and served the journalist with warrants and other papers authorizing them to search his house and vehicle for devices and documents. A letter addressed to the journalist Winstanley from the Counterterrorism Command of the Metropolitan Police Service indicates that the authorities are aware of his profession as a journalist, but that notwithstanding, police are investigating possible offenses under Section 1 and Section 2 of the Terrorism Act 2006. These provisions set out the purported offense of, quote, encouragement of terrorism. So the journalist is asked to give his electronics under the Terrorism Act of 2006 and under the Sections 1 and Section 2, which gives the police the authority to charge presses against him under the encouragement of terrorism allegations. Now, an officer conducting the raid informed the journalist that the investigation was connected with the journalist's social media posts, especially on X. Although his devices were seized, Winstanley was not arrested and has not been charged with any offenses. However, they have taken his electronics, so we have to wait and see what are they going to say about it and if they are going to charge presses against him. Now, the German government, after the incident of killing of Yahya Sinwar, and as you may know, I live in Germany, the German government, by the German Foreign Office and with headed by Annalena Baerbock, she said that Yahya Sinwar was a brutal murderer and terrorist who was bent on eradicating Israel and its people. As mastermind behind the October 7 terror attacks, he brought death to thousands of people and immeasurable suffering across an entire region. Hamas must now immediately release all hostages and lay down its weapons. The suffering of the people in Gaza must finally end. Now, the German Foreign Ministry doesn't directly say that Hamas is responsible for the killing in Gaza, tens of thousands of people who perished in Gaza. However, indirectly, they indicate that Hamas's attack was responsible for destabilizing the region and bringing death to thousands of people and immeasurable suffering across the entire region. Now, this is, in my opinion, a deliberate media strategy. And today we're going to discuss the Israeli media strategy after the killing of Sinwar and publishing the drone footage, and also another media strategy by the politicians, the officials, and the mainstream press which they're trying to portray that all the suffering of the Palestinians now in Gaza and the killing that happened in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas. Those are two separate, let's say, media strategies that we're going to discuss. The first one is the Israeli strategy, which they wanted to use this drone footage in order to give this image of to humiliate, let's say, the Palestinians and give the impression that the killing of Sinwar will definitely lead into spreading some, fear and intimidation by the Palestinians to discourage them from engaging in armed struggle against the Israelis. Now, if we want to see the map where Sinwar was killed in Gaza, this was in southern Gaza, and this is the map of the place. And Sinwar was killed in this building. And if you see the map of Gaza, this is where he was in Rafah. And Israeli military vehicles, and they had two posts already here, and he was around 300 feet away from the Israeli occupation forces for some time. He engaged with them in acts of resistance, let's say, or acts of hostilities, and there were artillery shells and tank shells against the building that he was fighting from. And at the end, he died. And this was the moment where the Israelis sent a drone footage to check his whereabouts, because they didn't know it was him at the beginning. They were just countering a Palestinian man wearing a kufiya, holding a gun, and fighting against them. They didn't know he is Sinwar. So they sent a drone to see the whereabouts of this fighter, and they realized he was injured severely. I believe, its left hand or right hand was amputated, and he was severely injured. And despite that, he had some sharpel in his hand or some wood in his hand, and he tried to throw this sharpel or the wood or the stick against the Israeli drone. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, I'm here going to show you both sides today for you to see what Israelis say and how they are using this as a win for them, and how the media strategy of Israel failed, in my opinion. So this is what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say about this. Of course, recycling the same things over and over again doesn't make it true, but he doesn't have anything new to say in this case. So here we go. He is speaking now in English. Apparently, this video is directed to the Western audience and not to the Israelis. So he speaks in English. Take a look.
1 year ago, Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist chief of Hamas, launched the October 7th massacre against Israel. It was the bloodiest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It was the worst attack on the Jewish state since the founding of Israel. Sinwar's terrorists murdered in cold blood 1,200 people. That's elderly people, Holocaust survivors, children. They brutally raped women. They beheaded.
By the way, this is the same as I mentioned, the recycled allegations that they raped women and they beheaded men and they cooked the babies in the ovens.
Men. They burnt babies alive. And they took some 250 men, 251 women, men, and children hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. Today, the mastermind of this day of sheer evil is no more. Yahya Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end.
This is very important what he says here, because we have to understand now what they are planning for, because the Israelis always try to give the impression that their problem is with Hamas and with the leadership of Hamas. If they kill Sinwar, and if they kill Dave, and if they kill the leaders of Hamas and the leader of Hezbollah, then there will no longer be a problem, because this was a revenge against this quote-unquote terrorist attack against them, right? But if you see the statements of Netanyahu and also Yoav Gallant, later we will watch his video, they all clearly say this is not the end. Like, they're not going to stop here. And some Palestinian commentators and analysts, they have mentioned this on their pages. It's like, okay, you killed Sinwar, now end the war. Like, no, they're not going to end the war. This is something that people have a misconception about what Israel wants from the Palestinians and what Israel intends on doing in the Gaza Strip. The project of eliminating the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip is the end goal, the extermination or the ethnic cleansing. So the Israelis have taken a decision to quote unquote end the Palestine project once and for all. And therefore, they want to desperately trying to kick the Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip and then do similar, let's say, criminal activities against the Palestinians in the West Bank through the settlements, through the Zionist radical settlers there, and also through military force. So my message for the Palestinians, if you thought that the problem of the Israelis are with Hamas, you are misled. Because the Israelis have been fighting the Palestinians way before there was Hamas and way before the establishment of the Israeli state. So Palestinians have to understand that their mere existence in their historical land is in jeopardy, and they cannot really count on Israel's good heart, let's say, or its good intentions to end the war. They will not end the war. They will continue, and they are determined, and they have a larger vision. And they're speaking about greater Israel. They are speaking about striking Iran, and creating what they call the new Middle East, that is pro-Israel and pro the United States. Now, I'm not saying they will be able to achieve that goal. I'm saying what their plan is about. So many people ask why they would publish this footage, right? The footage of the drone. Please let me know if you already watched the drone footage, because I'm really a little bit wary of sharing this video on my YouTube channel. You know the policies of YouTube. They would probably consider it graphic, violent footage. They could take down my channel. They could demonetize me and do all these things. So, but if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go to X and just type Sinwar, Sinwar, and check the video and see the person that they're trying to portray nowadays. He was a terrorist, this and that. So I made a short video about this, but first I'm going to show you some of the comments against Sinwar. For example, we have this activist who is, of course, pro-Ukraine, pro-Taiwan, and he is pro-America, pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, everything that you find it unhinged, he supports. So he says, Yahya Sinwar caked in dust, missing his right hand, cowering in a chair in a bombed-out building, desperately tries to throw a stick at a drone filming him. A fittingly pathetic end for a disgusting terrorist. Let Putin, Khamenei, Xi, and Kim Jong-un see and fear this. Another comment coming from a big account, I think this is an Ukrainian account, or I, to be honest, I blocked them after so many disgusting posts that I saw from them. He says he died like he lived, a coward. Okay. There are so many commentaries like this by these pages that he died like a coward. Unfortunately, like, you can call him, if you're pro-Israel, you may call him a terrorist, right? If you're pro-America, you may call him a terrorist. But a coward, I mean, he was fighting alongside his soldiers to the last breath that he has. He had an amputated arm. He was all in dust, filled with blood, and then he still was fighting to the last moment, you know? In this case, I made a video which is going to be editing this video now, and I will publish it tonight at 9 p.m. Central European time on my X account when the editing is over. But I'm going to show you the raw video of this. And what I truly think and believe about this case and why many of these so-called pundits in the West, especially the journalists, the activists, do not understand the psychology behind the armed struggle of the Palestinians and the Lebanese and the Syrians against the American-Israeli hegemony in the region. Take a look. What many people in the West do not understand, especially in the intellectual circles, the journalists and the pundits, is the motivation of people like Hassan Nasrallah, Yahya Sinwar, and the rest of the leaders in the Palestinian and Lebanese factions. They believe their own propaganda and their own wishful thinking and arguing that the motivation of these people is terroristic. They woke up in the morning and they chose violence against Israel. The truth of the matter is that their motivation, the main motivation, the direct motivation, was to liberate their territories, to restore justice, and to allow the Palestinians and the Lebanese to go to their towns, to their farms, just like they used to do in the past, before the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians and the occupation of the Palestinian, Lebanese, and Syrian territories. Now, if you follow what happened after the assassination of Yahya Sinwar, there is this big celebration from these pundits and from these journalists, thinking that the elimination of Yahya Sinwar will end the armed struggle of the Palestinians against the Israelis, which means they haven't learned from the lessons of the past, when many of the leaders of the Palestinian factions were decapitated, and the resistance from the 70s, 80s developed from a left-wing, socialist, sometimes nationalist groups into Islamic groups now, and God knows what is going to be the nature of this armed struggle against the Israelis in the future. So killing Yahya Sinwar will definitely not end this armed struggle. It will only motivate more people to join the armed struggle against the Israelis, especially after watching the footage, the drone footage of the Israeli occupation forces documenting the last moments of Yahya Sinwar, a 62-year-old man fighting alongside or with his soldiers on the front line, wearing a kufiya and injured, severely injured, and still fighting to the last breath. Therefore, when I say they don't understand the psychology of the people, I truly mean it. From their perspective, by publishing this video, they thought that this will break the morale of the Palestinians and other, let's say, armed factions in the region. What it has done, basically, it has created the opposite effect. Now they consider him a martyr, a hero, and this footage will only motivate more Palestinians to join the struggle. So, if the Israelis do not give the Palestinians their right to have a state on its Palestinian territories and continue occupying these territories, this will only lead to more armed struggle against the Israelis. People need to understand that the core of the issue is about the territory, the Palestinian right to have a state, and also the dignity of the people. So unless the Israelis give the Palestinians these rights, and they're not intending on doing so, the armed struggle will only continue probably for another 100 years. So the Israelis are in front of two options. One, to give the Palestinians voluntarily their rights and treat them humanely, or ethnically cleanse them outside of Palestine completely in order to finish what they call on the Palestinian cause. Personally, I don't think that the Israelis are going to give the Palestinians voluntarily their rights and respect them and treat them with dignity. Therefore, the armed struggle will only continue. I'm not here supporting any armed group against any other country. I'm just trying to explain the root cause of the problem, something that these pundits do not tell and do not understand. Why do you think that these pundits and these journalists do not understand? Is this deliberate, or do they really unaware of this psychology of the human being, And if they were born, let's say, in a place which has an occupation force, a foreign occupation force, and this occupation force has been persecuting them and humiliating their dignity and killing their, their parents and brothers and sisters and friends for a very long time. Do you think that they would have spoken the same thing, or they are sitting in their pushy, comfortable chairs far away from the conflict zones using their, Macs and Apple products and making philosophy for the people who live basically under occupation. I have seen so many people changing their minds after going to visiting Palestine. And these people have to go first to Tel Aviv, for example, airport. And in Tel Aviv, you will not see anything but a westernized, city, thinking that everything is like that. But then when you go to Jerusalem, when you go to Hebron, when you go to West Bank, and when you see the apartheid in action, in practice, and when you see the checkpoints, and when you see the separation wall, and when you see the treatment of the occupation forces to the Palestinians, I know people who have changed their mind 180 degrees. Some of them were on more neutral position and they changed and they became very, let's say, pro-Palestine. And others had sympathetic position on Israel and they changed their mind completely after going there. As one of these friends I met in Paris, and she was my colleague at the university, and she visited with a religious group. Like they organized these religious visits, free visits to Israel. And despite the fact that she was sponsored by one of the Zionist churches to go to Palestine, they call it Israel, anyways. And when she came back, she had her conscience like hurt, and she couldn't continue supporting Israel or giving justifications for Israel. And she became a pro-Palestine activist. And she follows my channel, by the way, and she supports our work. And I'm very happy to see more people like that. But this is something that, yes, people can change their mind and become more in support of the Palestinians. But practically speaking, on the ground, when you are in a very situation where you daily face this type of treatment and you daily see the humiliation of your father's dignity or your mother's dignity, or worse, some of your friends and family friends got killed by the Israeli forces or detained without any charges, basically, then you may also want to join the armed struggle. See, I'm not like justifying the armed struggle, because here in Germany they would understand it differently. I'm just explaining the psychology behind it, right? I think human beings have limits for how much they can tolerate such treatment. If you are in the street, for example, and there is a checkpoint, and maybe one time the police mood is, he's not in a good mood and he just spoke to you in a humiliating way, maybe I'm saying you may swallow it once or twice. But if it's a state policy against you every day, every day, every day, and especially that it gets worse with the killing, then probably these people say, I've had enough, like I don't want to, I prefer to die, basically. Many men say such things in the region, in the Middle East. They say, I prefer to die standing instead of walking, crawling. Instead of crawling, I prefer to die standing. So there are many people who prefer to die in a dignified way, according to their understanding what is dignity is about. And the people who, for example, join Hamas nowadays, do you think that they really believe in Hamas's? Or everyone who joins Hamas believes in Hamas's ideology or its practices? No. Many, many men join Hamas out of desperation, out of they have nowhere to go, out of nothing is changing except the armed struggle, right? And it's also, the situation is so horrible, like joblessness. There is no any hope for the people, hopelessness, right? Like there are no job opportunities. You cannot travel to study outside. If your sister or your family member got cancer, you cannot treat her in the Gaza Strip. If you need medicine, you don't find. If you want to fish, you cannot go further. Nothing. Like you don't have a port, you don't have an airport. Like it's like, you know what I mean? Those are all simple human things that many people do not take into consideration, and then they come and make philosophy on social media platforms, trying to say that this is a terrorist act. Like just if people woke up in the morning and decided to use violence. Now, why the Israelis published? What was the intended strategy, right? So Sana published a good thread about this. I will zoom in a little bit more. So Sana says that why did Israel publish this alleged footage of Yahya Sinwar's last moments? I have written about this before. Israeli propaganda is meant for Israelis and Zionists. Every bit of propaganda they put out is, from their vantage or from their point of view, meant to humiliate Palestinians as well as show a spectacle of their defense and might. So, in her opinion, that the Israelis published it because they wanted to. This footage was directed at or meant for the Zionist and Israeli audience. The Israelis have zero self-awareness on this front. They are consumed by narcissism. They see Sinwar's last moments and see their victory. Ending the lives of Arabs is that victory. Others, not vested in Israeli ethno supremacy, see a man fighting head on. He is not running away. It's a strong visual message that we all collectively can recall. The dying but still defiant native fighting the invader until his last breath. The Israelis, who are the invaders, are unable to fathom martyrdom. They are unable, sorry, So, the Israelis, the invaders, are unable to fathom martyrdom. They are unable to fathom the desire and existence of dying for something. We know this because of how easily they kill Palestinians with impunity. Anyone who examines a people, especially children, values neither life nor death. Yes, the Israelis are stupid, but more empathetically, they are narcissistic. In this video, they only see the death of the man that brought them to their knees. Others, as evidenced by the response, see the fight of the man who brought the Israelis to their knees. Unfortunately for the Israeli government, I don't think this video will have the effect they think it should have on their own people and supporters. It will on many, but the image and its message are too strong to be ignored. So, I this is something that she explained in a more sophisticated way than I did in my short video, and I agree with that. If you watch this video and you see like this person, you don't like you don't necessarily have to like this person. You don't necessarily have to agree with the group that he was leading. And personally, I don't know if you know me, I've been criticizing Hamas for a long time before this October 7 events started for their collusion and collaboration with the Qataris and the Turks. In any ways, I don't have, let's say, I didn't have a positive sentiments toward Hamas at all. But when you see a man, you don't know anything about this man, and you just watch the footage of a man taking his last breath, and he's severely injured. He cannot really move properly. He's in the dust and wearing this keffiyeh. You know, this type of heroism, you only see it on Hollywood, in Hollywood movies. But this was in real life. He was still trying to throw a sharpel or a stick on the drone. And this is the dystopian part of these conflicts. Israel has shown to the world what type of future conflicts is ahead of us. And this type of robotic wars and removing the human factor from it, like using AI, the lavender. The human is just like the last person who is like, yeah, okay, kill, but the AI is the one gathering data. The AI is the one locating the individuals that they want to target and deciding which one is a junior Hamas, which one is a senior Hamas, and which one is affiliated with Hamas. And then the human is like checking, junior Hamas, we can tolerate killing like 10 to 20 civilians if I can kill someone who is junior. And then someone is affiliated, okay, you can kill 10 civilians. He's just giving the last, click. Israel has shown the world what is capable of in terms of this AI warfare, in terms of weaponizing walkie-talkies, in terms of weaponizing AI, in terms of weaponizing these drones. They didn't show us the complete footage of this drone, of who killed the Yahya Sinwar. Was it the drone or was it some soldier? Because then somebody comes and says from the Israeli press that an Israeli hero soldier finally killed Yahya Sinwar. So, since we mentioned Israelis and some people were, in this thread, she was generalizing, of course, which I don't agree with. There are other people, for example, who are Israelis and anti-Zionists. One of which is Alon Mizrahi, who was a professional football player in Israel, and he became an arch outspoken anti-Zionist Jewish person. He has lots of following, by the way. And he wrote this. He said, he died an honorable death, a warrior's death among his men, one with his people in defense of his land against a genocidal intruder, occupier, and colonizer. The last episode of Sinwar's life could not have been better written by the most gifted playwright. Not in a tunnel, a secret bunker, or a far off palace, and not while engaging in some unworthy act. He died resisting. In his final moments, Sinwar knew that was it for him, but he didn't break. A proud Palestinian, Gazan, and Muslim to his last breath. He was born in 1962 in Khan Yunis to a family of 1948 refugees from Al Majdal. He was 5 when Israel occupied Gaza and never let go to this day, but it will eventually. In his last act of defiance, he threw some debris at an IDF drone. And I got to thinking, did he, as a young boy, also throw stones at IDF soldiers in Gaza? What that refugee who spent 22 years in an Israeli prison started on October 7 is going to change world history for good. The process is only in its initial phases. Now, I don't really know if this is going to make the world a better place. Up until this moment, to be honest, it's just the reaction of Israel made the world, of course, in a way worse situation than we thought it is, or it was. And my initial thoughts about October 7 was that the Israelis highly likely let it happen. This was my initial thoughts. I might be wrong, and I would definitely retract my statement if I'm proven to be wrong on this. This is just my initial thoughts. They wanted for such attack to happen and then implemented the Hannibal Directive and kill as many Israelis as possible. The IDF, they killed as many Israelis as possible by the helicopters and the tank shells because they have enabled the Hannibal Directive. And the footage of the tens of burned cars by artillery shells is quite clear evidence that they have implemented the Hannibal Directive. So probably, I'm just saying, I'm not underestimating the planning process. I'm just saying the intelligence of Israel was too sophisticated and strong to miss such a movement. And even if they missed when it happened or when it was happening, the inaction of the Israeli forces for a few hours was also suspicious. And then came with the full power and killed the Israelis. They bombed the kibbutzes and killed their own people, basically. So some of this footage that you saw from burned babies, they died by the fire of these artillery shells. Highly likely, let's say. So they used it as a 9/11 moment, and you remember what happened after 9/11. The world hasn't become a better place because the people behind 9/11, or the people who let it happen and turn the blind eye, whether you like to call it an inside job, or you want to call it a false flag, or you want to call it a controlled demolition, you call it whatever you want. But the world after 9/11 was not a better place. And that's why I have a little bit doubts in my heart, at least, that the world is not going to be a really better place, especially after what Israel has shown to the world that it is willing to do and how far it is willing to go in order to impose its will and its supremacy, let's say, on the rest of the people in the region. So those are the commentaries in favor of Sinwar. The last one is from Elijah Maguinier, which is in a similar context. Elijah says the significance of showing Yahya Sinwar killed in a house rather than hiding in a tunnel while wearing his military fatigues and apparently engaged in the fight cannot be overstated. Such an image portrays al-Sinwar as a leader who remained on the battlefield until the end, not as someone who was merely hiding underground, as many would expect. It strengthens the narrative that he was committed to resisting Israeli occupation forces up close, reinforcing his status as a dedicated leader among his people. For Israel, and particularly for Netanyahu, the leak of such an image by the military, especially when it bypassed the official chain of command, undermines any potential political or symbolic victory that his death might have brought. Instead of being portrayed as a fugitive hiding in fear, al-Sinwar's image as a fighter in military attire could rally Hamas supporters and boost the morale of the resistance, complicating Israel's narrative of victory. Moreover, the unofficial leak by soldiers reveals cracks in the discipline and information control within the Israeli military, potentially embarrassing the Israeli political leadership by spoiling the intended messaging. The perception of al-Sinwar as a martyr fighting to the last moment destroys the psychological impact Israel political leadership may have hoped to achieve through his elimination. To be honest, I don't know 100% if this was leaked or it was on purpose, or Elijah is engaged in some psychological media, manipulation. I don't know if I should call it a manipulation, psyop against the Israelis. I don't know if the Israelis leaked it or the Israeli army leaked it against the will of the leadership or not, to be honest with you. But the intended goal of killing Sinwar and trying to portray him as a humiliated, defeated person has failed. This is the PR strategy of Israel, which is in the title of today's video. It was a complete failure. It has motivated so many Palestinians and non-Palestinians, and even in the Western world, many people now see Sinwar as a hero. And they are ready to forget if Sinwar has done any wrongdoings in the past. This is how I saw from the reaction. Now, the second aspect of this propaganda, let's say, the media strategy, is sending scripts to the mainstream press and asking the press to basically now blame all the pain and the misery and the suffering and the killing and the maiming and the extermination of the Palestinian people in Gaza on Sinwar. So Sinwar brought this misery upon the Palestinian people because he did the October 7. This is the media strategy, right? And it is deliberate and it is planned and it is meant this way. So this is one of the articles in the New York Times, and they supposedly, allegedly, quoting a alleged Palestinian, which they don't want to name. So they have someone whose name is Muhammad, and he spoke to the New York Times on condition of anonymity for fear for reprisals from Hamas members. He said he's the one who made Israel do this. So this is the media strategy, folks, nowadays. We have to understand that this is deliberate. And this is one of the very good pages on X. He says, this is just astonishing. The New York Times just published a piece where they say many in Gaza celebrated Sinwar's killing and cite a fake anonymous person supposedly saying he made Israel do this to us. This is like publishing in 1944 a Jew in Auschwitz who wants to remain anonymous for fear of being killed by his fellow inmates, celebrated the crushing of the Warsaw Uprising, saying those evil communist Jews made the Nazis do this to us. This is actually what Der Stürmer published, and the New York Times is now doing it today with utter glee as the entire media class celebrates Ben Hubert for his brave, heroic investigative reporting. It is utterly insane. This level of genocidal murderous depravity that the New York Times and the entire Western media class gleefully indulges in on a daily basis. And they think they are the paragons of moral virtue as they do this. Finding some fake anonymous random guy in Gaza amidst a genocide and going, tell us how Sinwar made Israel do this to you. Tell us. I will make sure it's front page news in the New York Times. Ben Hubert is one of the sickest, most vile genocidal scum alive. He is the modern day Goebbels. I mean, this is his opinion. However, I will prove to you, or I will try to prove to you that this is scripted and this is something that has been highly likely sent by the US administration to these prostitutes, these journalists, to type these words. This is the script. So see, Yahya Sinwar was responsible for the murder of thousands of Israelis, Americans, and citizens of more than 30 countries. His decision to launch the terror attack on October 7, his decision to launch the terror attack on October 7 unleashed catastrophic consequences on the people of Gaza. See? This is the script, folks. And this is what the Americans want you to believe, that this was not prior planned and this was not something that Israel bears responsibility, and that Israel just acted, in the best way possible. But it was, it was him and his decision to bring this misery and suffering on the Palestinian people. How much of an evidence you need that this is scripted? If you don't believe this one, you may want to see the video of Yoav Gallant. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, who basically said that the Palestinians are basically, he's going to block water, fuel, electricity, medicine to Gaza, and he will starve them to death, because those are the Amaleks, according to him and according to his fellow Netanyahu cult members. So this is the same guy, right, who believes in collective punishment, and he literally said, like with his own words, that he wants to starve the people in Gaza. And now, in his recent video, after killing Sinwar, he comes again and says that we should blame Sinwar for what they're doing, I will show you this video.
מדינת ישראל סגרה היום חשבון ארוך שנים עם יחיא סינואר, רוצח ומחבל שפל. יחיא סינואר זה המחבל, רב המחבלים, שתכנן וביצע את 7 באוקטובר, שבו נרצחו כל כך הרבה ישראלים תמימים, ילדים, נשים וזקנים. החיסול שלו מצטרף אל שורה ארוכה של חיסולים, מנסראללה אל מוחמד דף ואל רבים אחרים. נגיע אל כל מחבל באשר הוא ונחסל אותו. יחיא סינואר סיים את חייו כשהוא מוכה, נרדף, נמלט על נפשו, לא מפקד על הארגון שלו ורק דואג לעצמו. זה מסר ברור לכל האויבים שלנו. צה"ל יגיע אל כל אחד שמנסה לפגוע באזרחי ישראל או בכוחות הביטחון ויבוא איתו חשבון. חיסול יחיא סינואר הוא מסר ברור לכל משפחות הנופלים, לכל משפחות החטופים. אנחנו עושים הכל על מנת לפגוע במי שפגע ביקיריכם ולשחרר את החטופים ולהחזירם בחזרה אל בני משפחותיהם. אבל זה גם מסר מאוד ברור לתושבי עזה. האיש שהמיט אסון על רצועת עזה, שבשל המעשים הרצחניים שלו אתם סובלים, הסוף של האיש הזה הגיע. זו השעה לצאת החוצה, לשחרר את החטופים, להרים ידיים, להיכנע. אני רואה לעצמי זכות וחובה.
So basically, he posted video in Hebrew translated to English, which means this is intended for the Jewish people in Palestine, Israel, and to the Western audience. And then he's sending message in Hebrew to the Palestinians in Gaza and telling them that it was him who brought this death and misery upon you. So now surrender and everything will be fine. I'm not going to give my opinion about the surrender and about armed struggle and everything, but I will ask you something here. And I want you to think about it, brainstorm it, and think about this scenario and put yourself in the shoes of a Palestinian who was born and raised in Gaza. What would you do now after the killing of Sinwar? Would you surrender and raise the white flag because it is too much? Because we have to take into consideration that these people are suffering daily with lack of sanitation, lack of water, lack of medicine, lack of food. You know, it's not like us sitting behind our laptops and talking to cameras. These people have suffered immensely. But if you were in the shoes of the Palestinians, what would you do? Would you surrender or would you continue the armed struggle? Would you join Hamas? Would you fight? Would you just, say enough is enough? I just want to live my life and leave probably Gaza Strip. I'm really interested to read your comments about this. So when this stream is over, the comments will be, of course, enabled under the video. So type your comment and I would like to read with you. And before leaving this live streaming, I would also highly appreciate it to check if you are subscribed, because 60% of the viewers of Syriana Analysis are not subscribed. That's a great help for me when you do that. And if you want to support this independent work that I'm doing 5 days per week between Monday to Friday, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you on Monday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and I wish you a happy weekend. Salam, guys.